December 15th, 1987, 9 p.m. St. Catherine's Church, Lakeside, Maine. The church bell of St. Catherine's tolled 9 times on that December evening, its sound muffled by the heavy snowfall that had blanketed the small town of Lakeside, Maine, for 3 consecutive days. Sister Agnes Blackwell completed her evening prayers, the soft leather of her worn Bible creating a familiar crease as she closed it and placed it on the simple wooden desk in her modest quarters adjoining the church's eastern wing. Outside her window, snowflakes danced in the amber glow of antique street lamps, creating momentary constellations before dissolving into the growing drifts below. The security footage, later recovered from the church's outdated system, showed the 36-year-old nun walking purposefully toward the confessional at 9:15, her black habit slightly swaying, her expression serene yet determined, as though driven by urgency not visible to the camera. The grainy black and white recording captured what would become the penultimate chapter of Sister Agnes's earthly journey. A woman with calm eyes that, according to those who knew her best, saw through pretense like light through stained glass. Father Thomas would later report hearing what he described as a muted conversation from the direction of the confessional, though he insisted no scheduled confessions were to take place that evening, and the church records confirmed this detail with troubling certainty. The elderly priest, battling early-stage dementia in the years that followed, would repeatedly return to this memory, each time adding, "There was something in her voice I should have recognized. Not fear, but resolve." The last documented sighting captured Sister Agnes exiting the confessional at 9:37, her previously composed demeanor now visibly agitated as she moved with haste toward the church's ancient underground crypt, an area typically locked and rarely accessed except during specific ceremonies conducted only 3 times annually. The camera positioned in the main chapel lost her as she descended the worn stone steps, her right hand touching the wall as if for guidance or perhaps comfort. A partial fingerprint on the heavy iron handle of the crypt door would later be identified as belonging to someone other than Sister Agnes or any church personnel, though the database search yielded no matches in the system, creating the first of many dead ends that would plague the investigation. Forensic analysis would later determine the print was left approximately 30 minutes before Sister Agnes's descent, suggesting someone was waiting below. When Sister Margaret arrived the following morning to accompany Sister Agnes to their weekly volunteer work at the youth shelter, she discovered the nun's bed untouched, her neatly folded nightgown still placed on her pillow, and her prized silver crucifix, a gift from her late mother, left behind on the nightstand, an oversight those who knew her insisted she would never make voluntarily. The crucifix, examination would reveal, contained a hidden compartment housing a microfilm slide with what appeared to be financial records. The local police, led by Sheriff Robert Cooper, initially approached the case as a potential voluntary departure. "We get this more than people realize," he told the Lakeside Gazette 3 days after the disappearance. "The religious life isn't for everyone, and sometimes people make quiet exits." This assessment failed to consider Sister Agnes's 22 years of unwavering devotion, or the unfinished letter found in her desk drawer, detailing concerns about financial improprieties that threaten the sanctuary we've built for those most vulnerable. The search of the church grounds over the following 72 hours yielded nothing beyond a single black button from Sister Agnes's habit, found near the garden shed where groundskeeper Edwin Morales kept his tools. Morales, a quiet man of 57 who had maintained the church grounds for 15 years, reported seeing lights in the chapel unusually late, but thought nothing of it, assuming someone was seeking spiritual comfort during the storm. Detective Jack Harper arrived from the state police on the fourth day, his weathered face betraying no emotion as he methodically photographed Sister Agnes's room, the confessional, and the crypt entrance. Those present recall his pause at the threshold of the underground chamber, his hand hovering over the stone archway as if sensing something others had missed. "This isn't about a crisis of faith," he noted in his initial report. "This is about someone who knew too much." 6 years later, construction worker Ray Martinez would guide his excavator's blade carefully along the church's foundation, where renovations to address long-standing water damage had finally begun. The ancient stone shifted unexpectedly, revealing a previously unknown chamber adjacent to the main crypt. Martinez's flashlight beam cut through decades of darkness, illuminating a tableau that would haunt him for the remainder of his life. Sister Agnes kneeling before a small altar, arms outstretched in cruciform position, her body remarkably preserved, eyes open and fixed on the ceiling as if in final witness. The town of Lakeside, population 1,837, had harbored secrets beneath its picturesque New England facades. Secrets Sister Agnes had apparently uncovered. The journal found clutched within the folds of her habit contained a cryptic final entry. "What we build in darkness will be revealed in light. The children must be protected, whatever the cost." Medical examiner Dr. Eleanor Patel would later determine that Sister Agnes had not died on the night of her disappearance, but had survived for approximately 4 months in captivity, sustained on minimal nourishment, while slowly succumbing to a combination of exposure and a rare toxin derived from local flora. More disturbing still was her conclusion that Sister Agnes's final position had been achieved while she was still alive, a deliberate choice rather than post-mortem arrangement. The disappearance of Sister Agnes Blackwell would eventually expose a network of corruption extending from the church altar to town hall, revealing how institutions meant to protect the innocent can sometimes become vehicles for their exploitation. But on that December night in 1987, as snowfall erased all footprints leading to and from St. Catherine's, the only certainty was absence, and the silver crucifix left behind, its hidden contents yet to be discovered. If you're finding this story compelling, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. The YouTube algorithm favors videos with strong engagement, and your support helps this investigation reach more people who appreciate in-depth, true crime storytelling. Now let's continue uncovering the truth behind this haunting case. The snow had finally stopped falling when Detective Jack Harper's unmarked sedan pulled into Lakeside on December 18, 1987. Local officers noted his arrival with sideways glances, an outsider entering their close-knit community, his reputation as a specialist in religious crimes preceding him, despite his reluctance to discuss the Boston case that had left him with both a commendation and a standing prescription for sleeping pills. Harper moved with deliberate efficiency, his weathered leather journal already filling with observations about a town that seemed simultaneously concerned and defensive about the missing nun. "The air here feels different," Harper noted in his personal log that first evening. "Small towns have secrets that breathe through their architecture. Lakeside feels like it's holding its breath." Morning light filtered through stained glass windows, casting prismatic patterns across Sister Agnes's modest desk as Harper conducted his initial examination. The investigation quickly revealed her computer contained encrypted files related to financial irregularities in the church's outreach program, their creation dates spanning the 3 months before her disappearance. More troubling was a folder labeled Sanctuary, containing photographs of 8 local children with troubled home situations, whom Sister Agnes had apparently been helping outside official channels. Each image was accompanied by meticulous notes detailing concerns about their home environments, with recurring references to something called the Shepherd's Program. The photographs themselves told stories beyond their subjects. Children photographed in public spaces, their expressions guarded, bearing what Harper's notes described as the particular vigilance of those accustomed to navigating unsafe waters. One image showed a young girl, approximately 10 years old, whose sleeve had been carefully arranged to cover her wrist, though the edge of a bruise remained visible. Father Thomas Morrow, visibly distraught during his 3 separate interviews, maintained that Sister Agnes had mentioned feeling watched in the weeks before her disappearance, though he admitted dismissing her concerns as exhaustion from her recently expanded duties overseeing the church's financial records. The aging priest's hands trembled as he recounted their last conversation. "She asked me if I believed evil could wear the face of respectability," he recalled, his voice barely above a whisper. "I told her that was why Satan's greatest trick was convincing the world he didn't exist. Now I wonder if I failed her by speaking in theological abstractions rather than asking what she had discovered." The search of the church grounds yielded a single unusual clue: a small vial of clear liquid found embedded in the soil of the garden beneath Sister Agnes's window. Later identified as a rare compound used in certain preservation techniques, though its presence could not be definitively connected to the disappearance. The State Police Laboratory noted the substance was commonly used in museum conservation, but required specialized knowledge to obtain, not something typically found in a church garden in rural Maine. Harper's methodical approach contrasted sharply with the local perspective. Sheriff Cooper maintained a polite but increasingly transparent desire to classify the case as a voluntary departure, a narrative that gained traction in town council meetings where prominent citizens expressed concern about unnecessary alarm being raised in the community. Local journalist Rebecca Collins, 24 and ambitious, published a series of articles questioning the efficiency of the investigation, highlighting Detective Harper's troubled past and suggesting connections between Sister Agnes's charity work and a series of anonymous complaints filed against prominent town figures. Her January 10th piece in the Lakeside Chronicle directly challenged the prevailing narrative. A woman who dedicated her adult life to faith doesn't simply vanish without taking her most treasured possession, a crucifix containing her mother's hair. What voices are being silenced alongside Sister Agnes's? And why is a town known for its neighborly concern so eager to stop looking? The weather turned brutally cold as January stretched into February. Harper continued his investigation while townspeople gradually mentioned Sister Agnes less frequently. Window displays for Christmas gave way to Valentine's decorations, then Easter preparations. Life in Lakeside appeared to resume its normal rhythms, the missing nun becoming a footnote rather than a focus. As weeks stretched into months, Harper found himself increasingly isolated in his pursuit, with Sheriff Cooper gently suggesting the case of the runaway nun be downgraded as other, more solvable crimes demanded the department's limited resources. The state police superintendent called Harper directly in April, questioning the allocation of resources to a case with diminishing returns. Harper's field notes from this period reveal his growing frustration. Something profound is hiding in plain sight here. The resistance isn't just bureaucratic, it's almost orchestrated. Each interview feels choreographed, as if certain topics are collectively understood to be off-limits. The children in Sister Agnes's files have all been relocated to new homes, their records sealed by family court actions that happened with unusual speed. The final active investigation report, filed 6 months after the disappearance, concluded that Sister Agnes Blackwell had likely fled her vocation for unknown personal reasons, despite the troubling inconsistencies and the passionate objections of both Father Thomas and her brother Michael, who insisted Agnes wouldn't abandon her calling any more than she would abandon her own heart. Harper cleared out his temporary office at the Lakeside Sheriff's Department on June 15th, packing 5 boxes of evidence that would collect dust in state archives. His final report included an unusual addendum. This investigation remains incomplete, not due to lack of evidence, but due to evidence that points to questions no one in authority seems willing to ask. Before leaving town, Harper visited St. Catherine's one last time. The church stood silent in summer twilight, its shadows lengthening across carefully tended grounds where children once played under Sister Agnes's watchful eye. Rebecca Collins found him there, her reporter's notebook absent for once. "You're giving up," she said, not a question, but an accusation. Harper looked toward the stained glass window, depicting St. Catherine with her wheel. "The case is closed," he replied, emphasis on the word case. But some truths refuse to stay buried forever. He left Lakeside the following morning as fog lifted from the lake, revealing the placid surface that gave the town its name, a tranquil facade concealing unfathomed depths below. The morning mist hung low over Lakeside as construction worker Ray Martinez began what he expected to be a routine day of excavation. 6 years had passed since Sister Agnes Blackwell's disappearance. Enough time for her absence to transform from shocking news into local legend, whispered about but rarely discussed openly. The church renovation project had finally begun after years of fundraising efforts led by Father Thomas, whose aging face carried new lines of grief alongside those of time. Martinez guided his excavator's blade carefully along the church's foundation, where long-standing water damage had weakened the century-old stone. The autumn air carried the scent of wet earth and decaying leaves as he worked, his machine's rumble echoing against the silent church walls. At 9:17, the ancient stone shifted unexpectedly beneath the pressure of the blade, revealing a gap that shouldn't have existed. "It felt wrong right away," Martinez would later testify, "like breaking into something that was sealed for a reason." The previously unknown access point led to a section of the crypt that, according to the church's architectural plans, should not have existed. Martinez climbed down from his machine and approached the opening cautiously, his work boots leaving distinct impressions in the disturbed soil, impressions that would later be photographed and preserved as evidence. His flashlight beam cut through darkness undisturbed for years, illuminating what he initially mistook for a statue, a black-robed figure kneeling before a small stone altar, arms extended outward in supplication or perhaps surrender. The beam wavered as Martinez's hand began to shake. The figure's face, partially visible beneath a veil of cobwebs, bore the unmistakable features of Sister Agnes Blackwell. Sheriff Cooper arrived 23 minutes after Martinez's call, his cruiser's tires spraying gravel across the church parking lot. Now, 3 years from retirement, Cooper had grown heavier, his once dark hair now steel gray. His expression as he approached the opening revealed a complex mixture of dread and validation, the return of a truth he had helped bury years before. "Secure the site," he ordered his deputies, the authority in his voice undercut by a tremor. "No one touches anything until the state police arrive." In his small office at the Portland Police Department, Detective Jack Harper received Cooper's call with a stillness that his colleagues had come to recognize as his response to significant developments. Harper had never officially closed his file on Sister Agnes Blackwell. Indeed, the case had followed him through 2 divorces and 1 rehabilitation program for sleeping pill dependency. He arrived at St. Catherine's by noon, his face weathered, but his eyes sharper than when he had left Lakeside 6 years earlier. The preservation of the body defied conventional explanation. Forensic pathologist Dr. Eleanor Patel, who drove 4 hours from the state laboratory to personally oversee the recovery, noted that the environmental conditions in the sealed chamber, cold, dry, and remarkably free of insects or rodents, combined with traces of the same compound found years earlier in the garden vial, had created a rare form of natural mummification. "She appears almost lifelike," Dr. Patel observed, her recorder capturing the professional detachment in her voice that belied the discomfort evident in her eyes. "The fingers show minimal decomposition, suggesting the presence of a preservation agent applied shortly after death." Most disturbing to the investigators was the positioning, not randomly arranged by a hasty killer, but deliberately staged in what Dr. Patel described as a position requiring considerable time and anatomical knowledge, likely achieved while the subject was still alive or very recently deceased. The cruciform pose, with arms extended and head slightly bowed, created an unmistakable tableau against the rough stone altar. Father Thomas arrived as the body was being photographed, his steps faltering at the threshold of the excavation site. He made the sign of the cross before speaking, his voice barely audible over the equipment. "She knew something was hidden beneath the church," he said. "She asked about original blueprints weeks before she disappeared." The recovery team worked methodically through the afternoon, documenting each element of the scene before disturbing it. At 3:40, a technician noticed something clutched within the folds of Sister Agnes's habit, a small leather journal, its cover darkened with age but its binding intact. When carefully opened under proper lighting, the pages revealed Sister Agnes's meticulous handwriting, the final entry ending mid-sentence on the date of her disappearance. "The ledger confirms what I suspected about the Shepherd's Program funds. Money intended for child welfare has been systematically diverted through a series of accounts connected to—" The sentence remained eternally unfinished, a testimonial silenced but preserved. Rebecca Collins, now the editor of the local newspaper and recently returned from an investigative journalism fellowship, arrived at the scene before most officials. Her press credentials earned her access to the perimeter, where she stood documenting the recovery with the same intensity that had marked her earlier coverage. Her presence caught Harper's attention as he emerged from the excavation site, his expression grim but focused. Instead of his usual dismissal of media interest, Harper approached Collins directly. Those standing nearby reported an unusual vulnerability in the detective's typically guarded demeanor. "I think we're going to need your help to understand what really happened here," he said, his voice low enough that others couldn't hear. Collins later described this moment as the intersection of 2 incomplete narratives finally recognizing their connection. By dusk, portable lights illuminated the recovery operation as Sister Agnes's body was carefully removed from the chamber where she had remained hidden for 6 years. The procession across the church grounds, captured in photographs that would never be publicly released, showed a small group of officials escorting a black body bag with unusual reverence. What none of the officials noted in their reports, but what several later admitted in private interviews, was the peculiar stillness that descended over the site during the recovery. Not just the respectful quiet of professionals at work, but something deeper that several witnesses described as a waiting presence. The journal recovered from Sister Agnes's habit would eventually reveal a carefully documented investigation into financial discrepancies and troubling patterns involving vulnerable children in Lakeside. But its most unsettling aspect was not its content, but its placement, clutched in a position suggesting that even in her final moments, Sister Agnes was attempting to preserve evidence. Dr. Patel's preliminary examination, conducted that evening in a makeshift examination room at Lakeside Memorial Hospital, yielded the case's most haunting detail. Sister Agnes's eyes, remarkably preserved in their open state, contained petechial hemorrhaging consistent with someone who had been conscious during their final moments, a witness to her own murder, preserving testimony that would speak 6 years after her voice had been silenced. The journal recovered from Sister Agnes Blackwell's preserved hands became the silent witness she had intended it to be. Forensic document specialists worked through 3 consecutive nights at the state laboratory, carefully separating pages fused by time and environmental conditions, revealing text that would fundamentally alter the investigation's direction. The leather-bound volume, measuring approximately 5 inches by 7 inches, contained 83 pages of meticulous documentation written in the steady hand of a woman who understood she was assembling evidence rather than merely recording observations. "Evidence doesn't vanish," Detective Harper noted during a recorded case review. "It waits to be understood." The journal's contents, partially damaged by time yet still legible, revealed Sister Agnes had discovered financial discrepancies, suggesting church renovation funds were being funneled to an entity called Shepherd's Guard, which she had determined was not a registered charity, but a private account controlled by 3 town council members and a church elder. Her notations, characterized by forensic accountant Eliza Winters as remarkably sophisticated for someone without formal financial training, traced hundreds of thousands of dollars diverted through a layered series of transactions designed to obscure their ultimate destination. Most disturbing were the entries from October 1987, where Sister Agnes documented conversations with children from her youth outreach program. The pages contained transcribed testimonies about a special prayer group conducted in private homes, where activities occurred that the children were instructed never to discuss, even with their parents or regular clergy. Sister Agnes had developed a system of gentle questioning that allowed children to share experiences without leading them, her methodology demonstrating both compassion and investigative rigor. Kevin, age 11, mentioned being taken to Judge Harding's lake house for special blessings that made him uncomfortable, read one entry. When asked to elaborate, he became visibly distressed. I did not press further, but noted similar reactions from Ellie and Marcus when the judge's name was mentioned during our art therapy session. The fragile alliance between Detective Harper and journalist Rebecca Collins formed over a rain-soaked meeting at Portland Harbor, away from Lakeside's watchful community. Their collaboration emerged from mutual recognition of complementary resources. Harper provided access to evidence, while Collins leveraged her network of local contacts to identify potential witnesses who had remained silent during the original investigation. The notes from their first strategy session, later submitted as part of the case file, outlined a methodical approach to rebuilding a timeline that had been deliberately obscured for years. "The town has two histories," Collins observed in her working notebook, recovered during case documentation. "The one they present and the one they protect. Our task is to reconcile them." The autopsy, performed by Dr. Patel with unprecedented thoroughness over a 5-day period, yielded findings that transformed understanding of Sister Agnes's final months. Trace amounts of a rare plant-derived toxin extracted from water hemlock that grew specifically in Lakeside's watershed areas were identified in her preserved tissue. The toxin's distribution pattern suggested administration gradually over an estimated period of 4 to 6 months, indicating prolonged captivity rather than a single violent encounter. More troubling was evidence of controlled starvation combined with minimal sustenance, just enough to prolong life without maintaining strength. The perpetrator had medical knowledge, Dr. Patel concluded in her 60-page report. The toxin dosage was precisely calculated to weaken without killing, suggesting the goal was extended suffering rather than immediate death. Father Thomas, now visibly aged beyond his 62 years, sat across from Harper and Collins in the rectory office, where sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting colored patterns that moved across his trembling hands. The recording of his statement captured a man unburdening himself of a secret that had hollowed him from within. "I heard her," he confessed, his voice breaking. "3 months after she vanished, I was praying in the chapel late at night when I heard Sister Agnes's voice calling from below. It was faint, like someone weakened beyond measure, but I recognized it immediately." The priest's shoulders curved inward as he continued. "I convinced myself it was my guilt manifesting as auditory hallucination. I even spoke with my physician about possible medication." His eyes, watery and red-rimmed, finally met Harper's. "She was alive down there while we gradually stopped looking. I will carry that knowledge into eternity." The State Police Forensic Unit deployed ground-penetrating radar across the church grounds during the second week of the renewed investigation. The technology revealed a narrow tunnel system, approximately 28 inches wide, connecting the hidden crypt chamber to an abandoned caretaker's cottage on the edge of the church property. The cottage, officially condemned as structurally unsafe in 1985, had remained standing due to repeated postponements of its scheduled demolition. Forensic technicians documented evidence suggesting the space had been modified to serve as a holding area, complete with restraints disguised as religious artifacts and a sophisticated ventilation system allowing long-term habitation. The modifications had been concealed behind new drywall, installed with professional expertise that matched the construction style of local contractor Gerald Morton, a deacon at St. Catherine's and council member Stephen Wilkins's brother-in-law. "The level of premeditation is extraordinary," noted forensic psychologist Dr. Miranda Chase after reviewing the evidence. "This wasn't an impulsive crime, but rather a carefully orchestrated containment designed to extract information while ensuring the victim remained undiscovered." Rebecca's investigation into town records, conducted through carefully cultivated relationships with courthouse staff, exposed a pattern that connected all elements of the case. The 8 children Sister Agnes had been helping had all been removed from their troubled homes and placed with approved foster families within weeks of her disappearance. All placement paperwork had been expedited by Judge William Harding, who had been a major donor to the church renovation fund and a vocal supporter of the Shepherd's Guard youth mentorship program. More disturbingly, Cross-referencing addresses revealed that all 8 children had been placed in homes located within neighboring counties, but owned through shell companies that traced back to the same 4 individuals implicated in Sister Agnes's journal: Judge Harding, Councilman Pierce and Livingston, and Church Elder Stanford. The evidence assembled by Harper and Collins revealed not isolated incidents, but a carefully structured system operating beneath Lakeside's peaceful surface for potentially decades. A network that Sister Agnes had begun to unravel, making her removal not a crime of passion, but one of institutional self-preservation. She wasn't killed for what she knew, Harper observed during a recorded case briefing. She was killed for what she was about to prove. Dawn broke over Lakeside on October 3rd, 1993, casting long shadows across the town that had maintained its secrets for 6 years. The renewed investigation had barely reached its 3rd week when Sheriff Cooper's deputy discovered 3 vehicles parked in precise formation at Judge Harding's Lakeside estate. The call came to Detective Harper at 5:43 in the morning, his voice recorder capturing the subtle shift in his breathing as he processed the information. "We have a situation," the deputy reported. "You need to see this yourself." The bodies of 3 key conspirators, Judge William Harding, Councilman Frederick Pierce, and Church Elder Jeffrey Stanford, lay in Judge Harding's wood-paneled study, each positioned in the same cruciform pose as Sister Agnes had been found. Their arrangement, however, lacked the careful precision of the nun's final tableau, appearing rushed and symbolic rather than meticulously executed. Medical examiner Dr. Patel, upon arrival, noted the poison used, the same water hemlock derivative found in Sister Agnes's tissue, had been consumed in concentrated doses, causing rapid death rather than prolonged suffering. "They chose a quicker path than they granted her," Dr. Patel observed, her clinical tone unable to fully mask her contempt. The suicide note, written in Judge Harding's distinctive cursive on his personal letterhead, contained 12 lines of text. Forensic analysis would later confirm it was indeed composed by Harding, though pressure pattern analysis suggested his hand had trembled significantly during its creation. The note bore signatures from all 3 men and contained a cryptic reference to the nun who would not be silenced in this world or the next, alongside a partial confession admitting to necessary actions to protect the greater mission, without specifying details of their crimes. The final paragraph spoke of judgment approaching from both earthly and divine authorities, suggesting the men had learned of the investigation's recent breakthroughs and chose death over exposure. Their collective end, while denying full justice through trial, inadvertently confirmed Sister Agnes's accusations through their final desperate act. Meanwhile, forensic specialists conducting a secondary examination of Sister Agnes's chamber made a discovery overlooked during the initial recovery: tiny scratches in the stone floor, only visible under specialized lighting and angled viewing conditions. The marks, clearly deliberate, spelled out "not victim, witness," alongside a sequence of numbers. Banking investigator Cynthia Zhao identified these as corresponding to offshore account details in the Cayman Islands, accounts holding millions diverted from church renovation funds and town development grants over a 15-year period. "She was writing her testimony with whatever she could find," Harper noted in his case journal, "creating evidence even in her final moments." Rebecca Collins, working through the night with archive materials at the newspaper office, discovered the historical significance behind Sister Agnes's final position. The unusual arrangement of her body, initially assumed to be imposed by her captors, mirrored a 15th century painting depicting Saint Agatha, a martyr who chose death rather than compromise her principles. This revelation suggested that Sister Agnes, even in her weakened state, had orchestrated her final moments as a message that would eventually be understood, transforming herself from victim to deliberate witness. She knew she would be found, Collins observed during a recorded case discussion. She was creating a crime scene that would speak when she could not. The most heartbreaking revelation came from Sister Agnes's brother, Michael, who arrived from Arizona carrying a leather portfolio containing letters she had sent him in the months before her disappearance. Written in coded language they had developed in childhood, the correspondence described her growing suspicion that the Shepherd's Guard was not protecting vulnerable children, but selecting them, grooming them, and redistributing them within a network that extended far beyond Lakeside to neighboring counties and possibly state lines. She knew the risks, Michael explained, his voice steady despite the grief evident in his eyes. Her last letter mentioned preparing insurance that would speak the truth even if she couldn't. State investigators, using information from Sister Agnes's journal and the suicide note, executed search warrants at 17 locations across 3 counties. The evidence recovered, financial records, correspondence, and most disturbingly, photographs of children, confirmed the operation of a trafficking network operating under the guise of child welfare and religious education for over 2 decades. Detective Harper, finally connecting all elements of the case during a 3-day evidence review, realized that Sister Agnes had likely been slowly poisoned not to silence her immediately, but to extract information about what evidence she had gathered and where it might be stored. The chamber where she was held contained evidence of interrogation, questions written and rewritten on papers found concealed in the ventilation system, focusing on names of collaborators and document locations. They underestimated both her resolve and her foresight in distributing evidence among trusted allies, Harper concluded in his final case report. She anticipated her own silencing and created a testimony that could outlive her. In the final press conference, standing before the renovated St. Catherine's Church on a November morning when the first snow began to fall, Harper refused to characterize the case simply as solved, instead describing it as a light finally shining on darkness that has operated unchecked for decades, with more work still to be done to ensure justice for all victims. Behind him, the church's stained glass windows, including a new installation depicting St. Agnes, filtered sunlight into fragmented colors across the assembled crowd. Sister Agnes Blackwell was finally laid to rest, with full honors in the churchyard she had once tended, her grave marked with words from her own journal. To witness is to bear responsibility. To remain silent is to become complicit. The ceremony, attended by hundreds, including several now adult children she had tried to protect, marked not an end, but a continuation of her testimony. The investigation her sacrifice had set in motion continued to unravel a network of corruption and abuse that would ultimately lead to 63 arrests across 7 states and the recovery of 22 children still within the system's clutches. Each case file bore a small notation in the corner, Agnes Protocol, signifying investigations that began with evidence she had preserved at the cost of her life. As snow covered Lakeside that winter, the town began the painful process of reconciliation with its hidden history. Some residents moved away, unable to face what had occurred in their community. Others committed themselves to healing and transformation, establishing support services for survivors and transparency initiatives for local governance. The final entry in Detective Harper's personal case journal written on the 1-year anniversary of Sister Agnes's recovery, contained a single line. She transformed captivity into testimony, suffering into evidence, and death into witness, the ultimate act of faith.